Newsroom. It is time for the France 24 debate. We're going to go live to a Friends of Syria conference at the French Foreign Ministry and get reactions from the likes of U.S. Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, her French counterpart, Alain Juppé. Now, this all happening as the UN Security Council has just approved 300 United Nations observers for Syria. They're going to have their work cut out. These captured earlier in the day on amateur video, reportedly from the Wadi al-Arab neighborhood of Homs. The UN Secretary General himself admitting earlier that it's a dangerous mission for those observers. Expectations high indeed, as witnessed Wednesday in this suburb of the capital, Damascus, when they were mobbed by crowds chanting angry slogans. The Russians and Chinese agreeing to those observers, but snubbing the Friends of Syria conference that's taking place here in Paris. So, is Moscow moving on the issue? What's the UN's next step on the ground? And what's the objective for diplomats gathered in the French capital? Today in the France 24 debate, Syria, what's the plan? And with us to talk about it is Jamal Khashoggi. He's the former editor-in-chief of Saudi newspaper Al Watan, now director of Al Arab News. You are welcome, sir.
Thank you.
Also with us, the former Lebanese Social Affairs Minister Salim Sayegh of the Christian Kataib. How do I pronounce it?
Kataib.
Kataib, it's close enough. Who teaches political science here at the University of Paris, and also with us, welcome back to Anton Kozlov, who teaches also political science at the American Graduate School. The France 24 debate, where you can always weigh in on the conversation, and you have on Facebook and on Twitter, where you can find us at François F24. That conference in Paris opening with a linear statement that we broadcast a short while ago. I want to get your reaction to it, Salim Sayegh. There was, among the statements made by the French foreign minister, the idea that the observers that are being sent in must have means on they must have air and land means or cover. It's hard to translate. He said it in French. But basically, he's talking about those observers having some backup, some teeth. Is that... Actually, how much do those words weigh at this point?
Actually, this is a new evolution. It was not expected, since the observers are meant to be disarmed and without teeth or muscle or whatever. Now, this statement shows that there might be a new proposal put to the floor. I don't see how this will be consequential if the Russians are not agreeing to giving more role and more presence of the observers.
And it shows, I guess, most of all, how dangerous a mission it could be.
It is actually very dangerous. I think everybody is just buying time. Nothing is going to happen unless there is a dramatic move by Russia, which is another topic, if you want, we can discuss about.
Which we will. Jamal Khashoggi, there was an Arab League mission a few months back. That didn't go very well.
Yes.
In this case, the UN observers, how's that going to go?
It should go well, listening to Mr. Juppé saying that they need to be to have a mandate, to be more powerful, to be able to choose the location they go to by air, by land. Why the Arab League mission went disastrous? Because it was under the mercy of the Syrian regime. They were the one who will dictate to it what hospital, or to start with this hospital and then go to that school, and not to go to Dar'a because the situation is not okay today. That was with the Arab League mission. And with this mission, they tried to do the same thing. Yesterday, they did not allow the observer to go to Homs. But the observers should have the right to go to anywhere they like, anytime they want, not to buy any excuses from the government and to say the situation is risky or it is under attack by the armed groups which nobody believes in. So I agree with Mr. Juppé. They must have teeth. They must have their own mandate.
Anton Kozlov, if those observers are not allowed to go places, as was the case on Wednesday, What should be the reaction of the United Nations?
Well, I think they definitely should be allowed to go where they want to go, where they find necessary, because the composition of this mission is international. There are those who are supporting Assad, there are those who are supporting the armed groups that are fighting Assad. So I think it is something that should not be an issue. I think it's definitely they should have freedom of movement in Syria, since they're there and they represent the United Nations. Now, whether they will get that is something else. We know that it may, in fact, be very dangerous. We know that there were French journalists and British journalists who were killed in Homs. I think whatever the transactions on the ground, I think in terms of the possibility, they should be able to go, definitely.
All right, so again, for those of us joining us, there is a diplomatic flurry in two places right now as we speak. One in New York at the Security Council, where they're discussing exactly how to back up the mandate of those UN observers, and the other here in Paris, this conference of Friends of Syria. Russians were invited, elected not to come. We'll hear from the Russian foreign minister in a moment. That conference opening with the foreign minister blasting Syria for ignoring the ceasefire. His boss, Nicolas Sarkozy, out on the campaign trail 3 days ahead of the first round of the presidential election in this country. Well, this morning, he drew the parallel with Libya.
Bashar al-Assad is lying. He's lying shamelessly. He wants to wipe Homs off the map, just like Gaddafi wanted to wipe out Benghazi. The solution is to establish humanitarian corridors for an opposition to be able to exist. I'm convinced that Bashar al-Assad's regime is condemned. I'd like to add one last thing. The Chinese and Russians do not like to be isolated, and when we meet among big countries to set a direction with our Arab allies, the isolation of China and Russia on the Syrian issue will not last.
So, Anton Kozlov, how will a statement like that go down on the Kremlin? On the one hand, the president talking about humanitarian corridors, on the other saying the Russians and Chinese don't like to be isolated.
Well, first of all, I frankly doubt very much that Sarkozy has any credibility when he speaks about comparing Libya and Syria, to begin with. Second of all, I do not think that Russians are going to be isolated because they do not come to meet the Friends of Syria, because this gathering is not a formal organization. It is some kind of coalition which clearly is in favor of the Syrian opposition. So the Russians had made a number of statements before that they're not going to participate, they're not going to take a unilateral approach backing one side or the other. They want to find some kind of solution through negotiation. So I don't think they're going to be isolated. I think Sarkozy, he's doing his gig, so to say, political, but I would not get nervous if I was a Russian foreign minister.
You wouldn't get nervous, Jamal Khashoggi, do you agree?
Yes, I agree with that. But what the Russians want, they want respect. Mr. Sarkozy said they don't want to be isolated. It is just another form to say, think of me, consider me, I'm a superpower. You cannot run the affair of Syria alone. I think we made a mistake. We in the Arab world, the international world, by trying to force certain resolutions down the throat of the Russians. We know that the Russians are siding with the regime, but the situation is very obvious that the regime is committing crimes there. And the Russians, I'm sure, sensibly, they will understand that. Just showing the pictures which you just showed earlier today with the observers in Homs, with gathering of Syrian people around them, if you show it to a Russian official, he will understand the situation.
All right, let's go to Annette Young, our senior international affairs editor, who joins us from that Friends of Syria conference. Annette, we're busy discussing the two diplomatic flurries, the one in New York, the one where you are. What's the objective of the meeting that's taking place where you are?
Well, I think, Francois, the key objective of this core group of countries is basically put together a list of recommendations for the UN Security Council. I mean, effectively, this group on its own cannot do anything It doesn't have the power, but what it does do is have the lobbying power. And what they can do is put together a list of measures, tougher measures, that they then can go back to the UN Security Council. In the meantime, lobbying very heavily, obviously, people in Moscow and Beijing to change their mind and to back these measures, especially as Foreign Minister Alain Juppé was just telling us an hour or so ago that there are very serious concerns that Annan's peace plan is not being implemented as quickly as it should. In fact, there have been a number of obstacles that have been put in the path of those observers. So what they want to do is now have a backup plan to take to the UN Security Council, and and we'll obviously find out later on in the next 10-15 minutes when this press conference is supposedly going to begin as to what exactly they will include. Inevitably, it's going to include tougher financial sanctions, ramping up those travel bans. Keep in mind, Francois, that already the existing financial sanctions have been pretty successful in that it's depleted at least half of Syria's foreign currency reserves. Other concrete measures that Hillary Clinton talked about was the fact of increasing the communications and logistics equipment that the Syrian opposition needs on the ground, and as well giving help to Turkey to set up some sort of assistance hub, if you like, so that that money can be funneled through to the right people on the ground, because there's been a lot of logistical problems, from what I can gather, from getting that money through to those rebel soldiers.
All right, so they're really talking about, in effect, they were sitting the fence, there was hesitation. You're talking there about logistics for the Free Syrian Army and for the insurgents.
Yeah, that's right, but of course they're not going to go as far as offering military assistance, and they certainly don't want to go down that path. Nobody is interested in any form of military help, that's for sure. So they're trying to look for as many ways as possible to help the Free Syrian Army. And one of the things that the Arab countries have been pushing for is this fund, which was put into place, which was to try and encourage members of the existing Syrian army to defect, give them cash incentives, if you like. But the problem has been, Francois, that money hasn't been getting through to the people who need it, which was an issue that we were talking about at the time that recommendation was first proposed. Sort of logistically, how do you ensure that money gets through to the right people and that it's passed on to people in order to encourage them to defect?
Salim Sayegh, you hail from neighboring Lebanon, a country that's known a long and protracted civil war. The idea of logistics, of sending weapons in, is it a good idea or a bad idea?
Actually, here we are discussing about the sex of angels, whereas the real thing is to give the people on the ground the means to live and survive in dignity. Those people have started with civilian protesters.
Does that mean, the way Annette was talking, tightening the screws with sanctions, or does that mean supplying insurgents with weapons?
There is an ethical and moral justification and claim to help the Syrian population continue to express freely its position. Now, no country in the world from the international community, other than the Gulf country who have given already their statement about that, no one is going to say, we are going to give weapons or provide weapons to the Syrian resistance or opposition. But we know for sure that there is a lot of networks of interdependence happening, making things happen on the ground. This is a fact. The networks of solidarity, the networks of community, of brotherhood, people are suffering in Lebanon, when they are seeing and hearing the bombs shelling Homs, which is only kilometers from Lebanese cities. People are angry because they think this is not about politics anymore. This is an organized genocide against a whole part of the population. So it's beyond politics now. As far as the Russians are concerned, because I've heard the comment, if you agree, and and saying that Russia, of course, I have started my speech saying that the Russians are holding the card, but for how long? There is the law of diminishing returns. It means the more violence, the more attacks on the observers, the more failure of Annan plan, the more the Russians will be losing about this. And I think this meeting in Paris is very timely because it's helping, again, reframing the whole issue.
All right, let's hear on that point what the Russian foreign minister had to say. Quite outspoken, quite clear as to why he wouldn't be going to Paris.
What is more important? There are too many people on the other side of the barricades, so to speak, who want to undermine the work of the observers, who want to bury the plan of Kofi Annan, and then call for buffer zones, security corridors, military support for the opposition, and a foreign intervention. There are many who have these wishes. They have not disappeared, and they hinder the mission of Kofi Annan. They undermine the mission.
Do you agree with that, Anton Kozlov, that this is undermining the observer's mission?
Well, look, I think if you look at this from the point of view that providing financial support, logistics, and so on and so forth to the opposition will definitely improve their military capabilities, yes, of course, it is undermining the Kofi Annan plan. So Russians would not accept that, they would not participate. I think what is important is that it is crucial for the Russians to try to preserve Bashar al-Assad's regime for reasons that, in fact, are extra-Syrian, extra-politically involved in Syria.
All right, before we go to the break, Annette Young, in her linear statement, the U.S. Secretary of State openly recognized that not everyone agrees on what's the best way to deal or help the opposition within those friends of Syria that are meeting. How does it break down?
Well, I mean, the fact of the matter is that there is extraordinary disagreement about what is the best way to move forward. I mean, clearly there's a school of thought within the Syrian opposition that international military intervention is the only way to go. But the reality is that is not going to happen. I mean, anybody who knows anything about that country knows that the Assad regime is a firmly entrenched military dynasty. Assad has made it clear that he's clinging on to the bitter end. So what are the other measures? What else do you look at in terms of basically bolstering that opposition and, more importantly, bolstering those on the ground? And that's where you're going down the path of measures such as I was saying earlier, giving communications and logistical support, giving anything but stop short well of obviously handing over weapons. And the problem has been with the Syrian opposition is the fact that it is a divided group, which again is very reflective of Syria as a whole, and of course feeds into international concern about what will happen if indeed the Assad regime was going to fall, who is going to take his place, and will the country fall apart? And we're already starting to see, obviously, clear signs of civil war.
All right, Annette, thanks for that. And don't go anywhere, because when we come back after the break, Annette Young will be crossing back to that conference center and to our guests here in the France 24 debate.